G'day, welcome back to the channel. My name is Tim. I'm a writer, I'm a reader, and I'm a creator. And today I want to do a little impromptu book conversation about what I read in March and what I'm planning to read in April. March was a bit of a weird month. I dislocated my shoulder in February for the 5th time and was recovering from that. I ended up getting sick. The weather was hit and miss. And the books that I read in that time truly reflect what March was as a month. On the other hand, I have big plans for April, so make sure you stick around till the end to see what I'm planning to read in April. But in the meantime, let's get stuck in. First up is Breath by Tim Winton. I've spoken about this book numerous times at this point in time, so I'm not going to labor the point, but the crux of it is a coming of age story in Western Australia on the coast in a 70s time period, and it is beautiful, it is stunning, it is honestly breathtaking. See what I did there? All that to say that I found myself reading Breath by Tim Winton again and was just blown away by how incredible the storytelling is, what he does with sentences and paragraphs, and the story as a whole, how he describes landscape, how he describes place, how he gets the little poetic idiosyncrasies of the Australian language and inserts them into his novel is just, I can't even describe how much it made me homesick reading this book. As a writer, each year I go back and revisit a handful of books that I think are important to me. I study their story, I study their structure, I study their sentences and pacing. And I do that because I think in a world where everything is condensed and shortened and we are avoiding the deep work, not everyone, but there are a lot of people that are, there is real value in studying something that you know and picking up the extra details and picking up the love in the work and the writing and the delivery that we often miss because we are always on to the next thing, which is why I reread those books. And Breath by Tim Winton is one of those books that I revisit frequently because I think it matters to me as a writer. This might be my favorite book of all time. I'm going to go back and make a video on my 10 favorite books of all time, so make sure you subscribe for that. But I think Breath by Tim Winton is on that, and I think everyone should read it. All right. I don't like making negative reviews. I don't like being the person that dishes out criticism. I don't like being critical. I don't feel like I'm qualified for those things. There's enough hate already on artists that I don't want to add to that noise. With that being said, I do believe there are books that I'm reading at certain periods of time that I don't enjoy, and I simply won't review those books. However, there are books that are tremendous stories, incredible reads, and tremendously written that don't fit where we currently are mentally in our lives. The Land in Winter by Andrew Miller was that for me. This is incredibly written. It's tremendous. It has passages that just grip me, but I felt like I was disconnected from the story. And honestly, that's a reflection on me in that moment and where my headspace was. This is a story set in England in the 1960s, and two couples get stuck in a snowstorm, and it is the unfolding of these events as they get trapped in this snowstorm. This book was nominated for the 2025 Booker Prize, and it was the people's choice to win. It's incredibly crafted. Andrew Miller is an incredible writer. While saying that, I wasn't in the right headspace to enjoy this book. I wasn't in the right headspace to connect with this story. I felt like I was the problem. And that's okay. Perhaps it wasn't snowy enough. Perhaps I wasn't sad enough. Perhaps I just wasn't in the right headspace to enjoy this one. But I will go back and revisit this possibly next winter. Anyway, that's The Land in Winter by Andrew Miller. All right, the next two are actually by John Marsden, who wrote the Tomorrow When the War Began series. It's the second and third books in the series. I'll pop them up on the screen. These stories are just really near and dear to my heart. I loved this 7-book series. It captured me as a teenager and it's capturing me again. I have so much love for these characters, so much love for this world, so much love for this place that he's created within the pages of this book. And if I'm being honest, these are comfort reads for me. I'm returning to a world that I loved as a kid, and while I am in this healing and recovering journey from this dud shoulder, I like to revisit things that I loved, that I'm familiar with, that I know. John Marston unfortunately passed away a year ago, but he is an author that I go back and study how he wrote and his craft and his stories, because he is one of those people that I feel connected with. The basic premise of Tomorrow When the War Began is a bunch of Australian teenagers go out into the Australian bush and go camping for a weekend. When they return, their country of Australia has been invaded by a foreign country and they turn to being vigilantes in the night to fight this war and help their country win. There's ethical dilemmas, there is right and wrong, there is death, there is relationships, there is politics. There's almost everything tied up in this story. And at the real core and the crux of it, it's a survival story. It gripped me when I was 13 and it's gripping me again now at 32. If you want a bit of action and adventure, a series for your teenager or a series for yourself, Tomorrow When the War Began. Iconic Australian literature. I was fortunate enough to be given an advanced reader copy of Mac Barnett's new novel titled Make Believe. It's a book for adults about children's books. And Mac Barnett is one of the greatest children's book authors that has ever existed. And he chronicles in a few different essays throughout this book how we as adults can serve younger readers and children's books. And there's a passage in this book that I would like to share with you. Anyone who spends time with children knows that they ask big questions. Big questions that are hard for us to answer. What is love? Does God have a face? Why do we dream? What happens after we die? Why do people get sick? Do trees have feelings? Why do we have to follow rules? Do dogs find things funny? Why do people fight wars? How do our brains work? Why is my friend nice to me one day and mean to be the next? Why do I have to clean my room? These are many of the same questions that writers for centuries have been asking. The child and the writer are both engaged in the same huge task, trying to figure out what it means to be a person in the world. Mac Barnett is audacious, honest, and real. And Make Believe comes out in May of 2026. And if you've got young people in your life, this book could certainly help you in one way, shape, or form. All right, next up, On the Edge by Kate Horan is a crime mystery thriller novel set in Australia. 16 years ago, Maddie Marshall's body washed up on a shoreline and no one could determine what happened. Nell Foley, her best friend, moved away and became a doctor, not returning to the town for 16 years until her father passes away with a sudden heart attack. Her returning uncovers an entire past that she would have liked to leave back in that town, and the story unravels from there. I feel like I read this book so long ago and it was just the beginning of March. And on that note, where the hell did March go? But this was fun, it was fast, it was engaging. I was very wrong about how it was going to go, and I really enjoyed the twists and turns and the ducks and the dives that came along with this story. And yeah, I was on the edge. All right, next up is The Academy by T.Z. Layton. I told you I was all over the place this month. This is an intermediate novel that is set around a young man who is a soccer player who is discovered by an overseas scout at a game that he plays incredibly well at. He is then recruited to the Junior Premier Team League and he has to try out for this team. The only problem is there's only 12 spots. He flies over to England. He goes to this camp. He's got some bullies. It has complications and adventure and fun. And this novel is the kind of novel that I would have wanted to read when I was 12 years old. And I simply picked it up because I was at work one afternoon in the bookstore, and I picked it up and I read through the first couple of pages, and I needed to know what happened. So I enjoyed that. If you've got a 12-year-old in your life somewhere, this Academy series might be for them. All right, the last book I read in March was The Hiding Place by Kate Middleton-Hall. Wow, it was paced incredible. It was gritty. It was fast. I turned through these pages and was just addicted start to finish. This follows the story of a group of friends that decide to buy a bush block in an abandoned mining town. On their first weekend out camping, things start to go wrong before they even arrive. And by the end of the first night, there will be a dead body. At first, it'll seem like hiding a dead body and keeping that secret will be easier than admitting to a lost job, a illegal crop, and a crazy affair. But everything has a way of coming to the surface. This was a book that I wish that I had written. I enjoyed how many perspectives there were. I enjoyed how short the chapters were. I enjoyed the entirety of it. And I'll just say that I still want a bush block with my mates. That's The Hiding Place by Kate Middleton-Hall. Well then, should we get stuck into April? Let's go. First, I have How to Tell a Story, a collection by Moth. This book has kind of just followed me around for a large period of time. I bought it 3 years ago and had intentions to read it right away and just forgot about it. And it keeps just popping up in random different places. Obviously, it's on my bookshelf, but it turns up at work. It turns up in my audiobook files. It turns up in different recommendations quite constantly when it comes to writing. And I don't know much about it other than I think it is a collection of essays on storytelling and how to be a better storyteller. And as I'm trying to write my novel at the moment, I figured that this book here, How to Tell a Story, could help a writer even like myself. Yikes. I'm editing my novel at the moment and it's not going as well as I would like. If you would like a little bit more insight into how that process is going, you can check out last week's video in the comments below. I tried Haruki Murakami's 4 AM writing routine. Check it out if you'd like. Next up is Zadie Smith, Dead and Alive Essays. This has been on my list since it came out and I'm gonna get stuck into it this month. I love Zadie Smith. I think she's one of the best essayists of all time. I haven't read any of these essays, but I have read a couple of her other essay collections, White Teeth, and she had another one that came out during COVID that I can't think of the name of right now, but that was also fantastic. And I think she's incredible. I think what she does, the craft, the love, the dedication, the way that she has you thinking throughout the entire process is exactly what an essay is meant to be. And I'm really looking forward to this one. Zadie Smith, man, wow. My third read for April is going to be This House on Grief by Helen Garner. I have heard about Helen Garner for pretty much as long as I've been an adult reader, and I've never read any of her works. And it wasn't until the other day that my coworker asked, "Have you read any Helen Garner?" And I said, "No, I haven't." Nor did I realize that we carried it at the bookstore that I worked at, and I read through a few of her books. And this is the one that caught my attention. This is a true crime story set in 2005 on Father's Day. A father is driving his 3 sons back to their mother's place, and the car veers off into the dam. All 3 boys drowned. This was a major news story when I was in primary school. It was all over the news. It was all over the telly. You couldn't escape it for weeks on end. And as a kid at that time, I remember being fascinated by this idea, but also annoyed that it was on the TV. But I never really found out what happened in that case. And this story kind of outlines the court case and the troubles and the tribulations and the challenges that this whole case posed. Was it done on purpose? Was it an accident? Was it a suicide? What happened? And Helen Garner writes this story, and it's this true crime piece of work that I think is going to be really haunting and really harrowing and really heartbreaking. But I don't remember what happened. And someone recommended that this was the story by Helen Garner that I needed to read. And I guess I'm going to read it this month. And my final book of April is going to be King Leopold's Ghost by Adam Hochschild. I think that's how you pronounce it. I've heard that this is both phenomenal and maybe one of the most haunting reads of all time. And I don't know if I'm ready, if I'm being truthful. In the late 19th century, King Leopold II of Belgium took over the Congo and caused over 10 million people to die for his lust, his greed, and his power. From what I've been told, this is incredible storytelling. It is non-fiction that reads like fiction. It is harrowing. It is hard and difficult reading, while also informative and historical and represents Africa and the Congo of that time. I didn't come across this story until rather recently. I don't know if I missed that history class. I don't know if it was taught to us in that history class. And when I learned about this book and I learned about this story, it felt like something I had to pick up and had to learn about, even if it's something that's incredibly difficult. I'll report back on this one, but that's King Leopold's Ghost. Anyway, that's going to be my jam-packed month of April. I'm looking forward to it. There are some serious reads in here. There is some power. There is some story. Anyway, guys, thank you for joining me for an impromptu chat about what I read in March and what I'm planning to read in April. Let me know in the comments below what you read in March and what you're planning to read in April. Reading is power. Reading is exploration. Reading is self-discovery. Reading is learning. Reading is what fills me up. And I love sharing that with other people. I love sharing books. I love sharing new stories. I love sharing things that I liked. I like sharing things that I struggled with. I just like sharing it. So thank you for joining me. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. Anyway, be kind to yourself, be kind to one another, and I'll see you back here next week. Anyway, good on yous.